So here's a real curiosity. X-Bomber, or Starfleet X-Bomber, is a marionette show from 1980, created in Japan by one Go Nagai, famous for Mazinger Z, Get a Robo, Devilman, and Cutie Honey. It ran for 26 episodes, but apparently didn't do too well. It was, however, picked up to be brought over to the UK, among other locations. Here, it was given an English dub, as well as the Starfleet prefix mentioned earlier. I can only assume this was done because it was similar to shows like Thunderbirds, and sci-fi was popular at the time. Regardless, Starfleet caught on a lot better overseas, and the script even remained pretty faithful to the original. So today, let's talk about this show and why you might want to give it a watch. Let's start by addressing the dub. Since this was a foreign property in the 80s, the question comes up as to whether the translation is anything close to accurate, or whether characters and plot points were changed. According to the internet, the script of the series is nearly identical, with the names of some characters being changed, and the dialogue not being one-to-one, but still keeping the intention. Examples of name changes can be seen in our three protagonists: Shiro Ginga being changed to Shiro Hagen, Bigman Lee being changed to John Lee, and Bongo Heracles being changed to Barry Hercules. Yeah, maybe that last one was for the best. Other notable changes include the music and sound effects. From what I've heard, it was simply cheaper to record new music and sounds than to license the originals, so that's what they did. It sounds fine though, nothing to complain about. There's also a removed episode, but it was only a recap episode, of which there are 2 others in this series, so apparently there's no real loss there. Going forward, I'll be using the terminology of the English dub, since it's the version I've watched, and seemingly more popular. So what's this series even about? In the year 2999, mankind has spread across the solar system. Suddenly, there's an attack by the Imperial Alliance, a group of aliens bent on finding some kind of superweapon called F-01. After an attack on Pluto base, they make their way towards Earth, where the Earth Defense Force, or Starfleet, launched a new secret weapon, X-Bomber, a powerful new ship led by Dr. Ben, with help from a small droid named PPA, and the 3 pilots I mentioned earlier, Shiro, Lee, and Hercules. There's also Lamia and her guardian Kirara, who seem to have some connection to F-01. Using the power of the X-Bomber and the combiner mecha Die-X, the show chronicles the conflict between the Earth forces and the Imperial Alliance, as they try to discover what F-01 is and why the Alliance wants it so badly. I see people make the comparison that the series is like Get a Robo mixed with Star Wars, but it actually reminds me a lot of Space Runaway Ideon. The series plot is overall pretty basic, but it gets the job done. It has some really strong character moments. Instead of being episodic, it's an ongoing continuous plot, with some good development and on-screen deaths. The characters themselves are pretty likable. Shiro is a typical space cadet, Lee is relaxed and sarcastic, Hercules is more mature but always ready for a fight, and Dr. Ben acts as a good mentor figure keeping them in line. Lamia is a little bit of a damsel at times, but I never thought it was detrimental to her character. PPA reminded me a lot of C-3PO, but his snark made up for it. The only main character I didn't really care for was Kirara, who didn't really seem to have a purpose or do much throughout the series. Besides them, I actually found myself liking the villains as well. Our main antagonists are Captain Makara and her second-in-command Orion. Each episode will typically involve them trying to destroy X-Bomber or obtain F-01. To their credit, besides failing most of the time, they come across as very competent, hatching several good plans, and never really having a moment where they're brought down by their own stupidity instead of the protagonist's competency. They are led by the Imperial Master, but unfortunately, he doesn't get much screen time. Moving on to the presentation aspect, I feel like marionette or puppet animated works are an underappreciated art form. I think this show is aged well considering, and there's just something so charming to me seeing all the practical models and explosions. Besides the odd laser blast, this show is animated with a combination of puppets and the odd suit actor. The character designs are style over realism, and I think it works well. I really like the designs used for the Imperial Alliance. They got this whole insectoid thing going on with their uniforms and spacecraft. The X-Bomber itself is also very distinct. Interestingly enough, you would think that after the giant robot, Die-X, gets introduced a few episodes in, that it would be the series' problem solver, but it's not used as much as you would think. The Die-X itself is fine, nothing too fancy about it. It mainly punches enemies or blasts them with lasers and rockets. I think my favorite aspect though is how the three pilots control it. From how it's shown, Hercules moves the whole upper torso, Lee kicks things and shoots with its feet guns, and Shiro just stays in the head and spots enemies for them. I know dividing up a robot into 3 parts isn't always easy, but Shiro really does just pilot the head as a plane. The Die-X itself is portrayed using a suit actor. It is fun to see it tear apart the tiny models. The puppets here are controlled from the bottom, so no hanging strings, but you won't really see their legs. Sound-wise, the series features a pretty solid soundtrack, and some very classic sci-fi sound effects. One thing about watching the dub though, is that they try really hard to match the lip flaps of the puppets, and there are some lines that come across as very stilted or oddly delivered as a result. Nothing uncommon considering, I just thought I'd bring it up. In conclusion, while not a 10 out of 10 show that will change your life, I've never heard anyone talk about X-Bomber, and that's a shame. I think there's a lot to like here if you give it a shot, and a few genuinely good moments. So if you like Go Nagai, puppets, or sci-fi, go give Starfleet X-Bomber a shot.